Hello and welcome back to my TB45 Turbo Patrol build, episode 3.
Show them what it really means to live life golden. Yeah, we're golden, baby girl, we're golden. They're about to see it shine, 'cause we're golden.
In the last episode, we assembled the whole bottom end of the motor. We got the pistons, the rods, the crank, and we also got as far as putting the timing chain and timing sprocket sump. If you haven't checked out that video, make sure you go and check that one out. First up, I'm going to prep the timing cover. With these timing covers, they run 2 oil pump O-rings that are very important not to muck up. The other one is sitting over here. When installing these O-rings, all I do is rub a little bit of rubber grease around the O-ring surface, install the O-ring in, and then it should seal and sit in there nicely and it shouldn't try to pop out. When installing this timing cover, what we need to do is we need to get some of our sealant, and we need to run a seam of sealant all the way around the full surface, so then when we stick it on the front of the block it seals nicely and then you bolt it up. I'll get into that now and I'll set up a bit of a time lapse so we get that sorted and get this timing cover all. The timing cover is all bolted on, torqued all the bolts to 20 Newton meters as per the book. Now that's on, we can drop the distributor in and we can bolt the head on, so that's a bit exciting. So there you go, there's the timing cover. Next up, let's do the head. So what I've decided is that next I'm going to install the crank pulley. Now with this crank pulley we can time up our motor and then we can drop our distributor in. So using this mark here on the timing cover, and then our mark on our crank pulley, this first one here, we can line them up, we can perfectly get TDC. So each one of these increments is 5 degrees. The first one on the left is our first one that's at 0 degrees. So we can set this motor perfectly at 0 degrees and drop our distributor in. Now the crank pulley is all on. All you gotta do now is torque the crank bolt up to 147 Newton meters, and then that is all sorted. Next up, we're gonna bolt the head on. I've already got all the new valve springs in there. Valve stem seals are brand new and all the valves have been seated in the head. And we've also had the head decked, so it's all flat, ready to go on. All the head studs are in, head gasket is on. So next up we're going to drop this head on and then we'll torque all the bolts down on the head and get it all sorted. So the ARP head studs are now in, torqued to 62 foot-pounds. So the head is officially on. We are moving forward, so that is awesome. That's good. Next up, we're just going to drop all the push rods in. So we've got 12 push rods to go in. And then just the valve train, we'll bolt that down, torque that to spec. And then once that valve train's bolted on, we'll do all our valve clearances, all our cold valve clearances, which we'll check from the book and see what that spec says. The whole valve train is now bolted on. We have not done valve clearance yet, but right now we've just bolted it on, and we're just going to make sure that nothing hits when we turn it over with the spanner, and just make sure all the valves are moving correctly and nothing's getting caught up or stuck, or there's no weird noises. We've got different valves moving at different times as they should be. No weird noises, which is good. So now we are going to set all the valve clearances. As you can see, cold for intake and exhaust is 0.20 of a mil. Yet when it is warm, it is 0.38 for the intake and 0.35 for the exhaust. So right now, because the motor is obviously cold, we haven't started or anything, we're only going to set them to 0.20. And then once the motor is in, running and warmed up, then we will change our valve clearance and set them to 0.38 and 0.35. Now, procedure follows. We're going to set the piston to number 1 TDC. So this is 180 degrees out right now because our point is pointing at cylinder 6 on when the dizzy cap's on. So we want that at the front. Once that's at the front and our timing light is marked up with our timing cover, what we're going to do is we're going to set the valve clearances on 1, 2, 3, 6, 7 and 10. So in that case it's 1, 2, 3, then you've got 6, 7 and then 10. So they're all going to get set to 0.20 right now, but obviously later on intakes, which is all your first ones of your cylinders, they're all going to be 0.38, and then all our exhaust, which is our seconds, they're all going to be 0.35. But for now I'm going to set them all to 0.20. We're going to set up a bit of a time lapse and we'll get right into it. But once we've done that, you rotate it 180 degrees. So once it's at number 6 TDC, which is what it's on right now, and then you do valve clearances of 4, 5, 8, 9, 11 and 12. We're going to install the oil pickup. That just mounts to the bottom of your block. So the oil pickup needs to be torqued to 18 Newton meters. So we'll torque them up. As you can see, perfect, 18.9, pretty close. Doesn't have to be absolutely perfect because it is just the pickup, but that's the oil pickup all torqued in. Next up, what I'm going to do is I'm going to install the engine mounts just because I have them here. So I'm going to install them, and then I'm going to flip it back over, and then I'm going to install spark plugs. So engine mounts to cylinder block, brackets to cylinder block, 88 Newton meters. So we're going to torque both these engine mounts. Obviously one on this side of the block, one on this side of the block. We're going to torque them up to 88 Newton meters, and then they'll be bolted on out of the way, and then we can move on. So now we're just setting all our spark plugs to a 22 thou gap. As with the turbo setup, you want your gap to be 22 thou. As you can see, that one's 22 thou. Otherwise, the spark will extinguish before it actually tries to spark. See how that one's big? And that will cause misfires and all that kind of jazz, so we don't really want that happening. So now the spark plugs are set to 22 thou plug gap. We're just going to install them into the spark plug holes. Once all the spark plugs are in, we'll move on from there. So now it's time for the sump to go on. We've drill and tapped our hole here for our oil return for the turbo. So that's all drilled and tapped, sitting in the sump, ready to go. I'm going to add a bit of Celastic to the surface of the sump, and then come over here, stick the sump on, and then torque it all down to spec. So we're going to be tightening the sump in this sequence as illustrated here. So once we put the sealant on the surface of the sump, we'll tighten it down in this sequence to make sure it seals correctly and it goes down nice and even. And then once that's all on, we'll torque it up. And torque spec for that is 18 to 21 Newton meters. Sorry, 16 to 19 Newton meters, as you can see in this book. So we're going to torque it about 18 Newton meters, and then the bottom sump is 6.3 to 8.3. So we'll torque it pretty much at the max. So we'll go about 8 Newton meters on that. We'll torque them both down now. Both sumps and the rear main seal, I did forget to mention that. Make sure you install your rear main seal before you install your upper sump, because the upper sump actually bolts to the rear main seal using these 2 bolts. So both those sumps are on now. They're all siliconed up. 8 Newton meters torque for these ones, 18 Newton meters torque for the upper sump. Yeah, she's looking pretty good, so we'll flip it back over and then we'll move on. So pretty much next up, all we're doing is we're going to slowly take parts off this motor and we're going to slowly transfer it into that motor. So I might set up a time lapse. So pretty much what we're going to do is these rock cover bolts, because they're the bolts that I added. So I want them ones because they're nicer than the Phillips head ones. The whole intake, the whole front setup, so water pump, belts, alternator, tensioner, compressor, and then the exhaust side, and then obviously everything that the turbo runs to. So we need all the oil feeds and the coolant feeds and all that. And then once that's all off, that's pretty much done. Oil cooler, pressure switch. I'll set up a time lapse and I'll just start ripping. All bolted on. We got the oil feed, factory they have an oil feed in the back of the block here, which is pretty awesome. So we got the oil feed in, and then these are both just water lines. So we got to bolt the intake manifold on, and these water lines will both run to that. So then that's sorted, that's that all done. Dizzy cap, which is just there. I'm gonna get that dizzy cap all on, bolt it up, and then other than that, we just got to do alternator and then the belts. And that's it. We'll get them all on. Only thing we can't do is that oil cooler, waiting for a gasket. That will be coming on Monday. So today's Saturday, so that's 2 days. 2 days time we'll have that oil gasket. So we can put our oil cooler in. Once the oil cooler's in, that's done, sorted, ready to go on the car. So in saying that, once she's all ready, the next episode after this is going to be dropping the motor in, which is pretty cool. So I'm actually very excited for it, and yeah, it's gonna be good. But first up, before we get too excited, let's get this We'll put the distributor on now, and then the oil cooler in when we get the gasket. Now all I've done is I've cleaned up all the leads for the distributor, and all that's left to do is to place the distributor cap on and then line all our spark plugs up. Obviously I got them numbered anyway, but you can look at them and then you can check the book, see what the firing order is, and make sure you get your leads around the right way. Very important, otherwise your car will misfire. So I'll place that on, and then that's pretty much it. And that is it. That is the motor officially built. Everything is done, bar the oil cooler. That is the only thing we need to put on. But I'm waiting for a gasket. I'm getting a paper gasket very soon, so once that's done, I'll slap that on. But I'll just put that in, not even film it, and then dropping it in will be the next episode. So that's pretty much going to do it for this one. Hope you guys enjoyed this one. Be a bit of a hefty build. We put the motor completely together, so it's been good. Yeah, looking forward to the next one where we're actually going to be putting the motor in the car and hopefully getting it running. But I'll see you guys then. Peace.
What it really means to live life golden. Yeah, we're golden, baby girl, we're golden. They're about to see it shine, 'cause we're golden.